Now, at a time when graphics cards are getting bigger and more expensive, today I'm going to show you that it's not always the case. The graphics card I've got here didn't actually cost me a thing. All it was is just a bit of a favor for a friend, and I want to see how well we can actually game on it. Now and again, I like to stay grounded with older tech, and that is what we've got here today. I managed to pick this graphics card up from a friend who actually just wanted me to upgrade this one for a new graphics card. Not everybody out there is computer illiterate, particularly when it comes to building PCs. So I did that for them. I dropped the new graphics card in. I made sure that they've got the latest drivers. And as a bit of a thank you, they said, keep the old graphics card. But what exactly is it? This graphics card in here is probably something that many people, budget gamers particularly, still want, so it's not terrible. It's actually an NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1660 Super. I know a lot of you out there will be saying that this is still a more than capable graphics card because a lot of people still do use them. They were actually super popular, particularly when they were released, which was around 2019, which makes it about 6 years old now. We've tested way older graphics cards on this channel, so of course we've got some high expectations for this one. Managing to get this graphics card for free was actually really nice, and it just goes to show that if you still do favors and be nice out there, some people will actually return that by giving you graphics cards. So if you are a budget gamer out there, make sure you share your knowledge, particularly if you know how to build PCs, because someone out there may actually give you a bit of a hand-me-down. And to be honest, this is exactly how I used to build PCs when I got into it. It was always a case of doing a favor for somebody and getting their old parts and making sure that my system was upgraded with them as well. I used to use some really old PCs back in the day, but they got the job done. Nobody was really chasing frames back then. It was all about pure gaming, and that's exactly what I used to do. The GTX 1660 Super was actually the refresh to the GTX 1660, which was actually a non-ray tracing or RTX version of the 2060. So that kind of makes this graphics card a kind of non-RTX or non-ray tracing version of the 2060 Super, which many people still do use today. So of course we're going to be limited a little bit in the types of games that we can play, particularly with those that are coming out with mandatory ray tracing hardware requirements, but apart from that, I think it's probably going to do quite well in most of the games. It does sit on the Turing architecture, and it has a base clock speed of 1530 megahertz, a boost clock speed of 1785 megahertz. It has 1408 shaders, and then probably the biggest limitation in today's gaming, it only has 6 gigabytes of GDDR6. That does include a memory bus of 192-bit, and it does sit on a PCI Gen 3x16 interface. When it comes to power, there's a slight difference here to the normal 1660, with the 1660 Super requiring 125 watts, which still isn't a lot at all. You could pretty much power this off of any 300 watt power supply, which makes it very versatile, and it was released for originally around $229. Although if you were to start looking on eBay for them now, in the UK here, you'll pay roughly between £80 and £100, which still seems a little bit high, particularly for the type of graphics card we've got and the age of it. It is technically like a budget level graphics card. It's still a 60 class, but that's exactly what people are asking for them, and to be honest, they're probably getting them as well, because new graphics cards cost so much that it's not driven the prices down and things like this. They're actually maintaining quite high values. That's probably a little bit different in other locations, but here in the UK, that's roughly the kind of price you would pay if you were to go straight onto eBay now and do a bit of a buy now. But of course, are they actually worth £80 to £100? Well, the only way we're going to find that out is drop it into a system and try some games. Now, the system that we're testing the card in today is our bench rig, and it's not typically this kind of system that you would use this card with. It does have a 9800 X3D with 32 gigabytes of DDR5. That system is just way overpowered for a graphics card like this. This graphics card would work in any kind of older Intel system, AMD system, and you'd still get very similar results because the graphics card doesn't really need a lot to be able to punch through. It's not like an Intel Arc graphics card that requires things like rebar and stuff like that. You can get away with some pretty older systems. The card that we do have is the MSI model, and it's a very base level model. So the one thing that's really annoying about it is the fact that the fans are always spinning. There's no kind of stop start technology in them, which can add a little bit of noise to your build, but it's not too bad. They've actually done a decent job of it. This card is very, very dusty, and it could probably do with a bit of a clean and a repaste at some point, but we're not going to do that today. We're actually just going to get straight into some gaming. Now, like I said before, you won't be able to play any games like Indiana Jones and the Great Circle or Doom the Dark Ages because they do require hardware ray tracing graphics cards, and this one just simply isn't one of them. Even if you did have that technology, or even if you could bypass it, those games will not run very well at all because of the very limited 6 gigabytes of VRAM. Even Indiana Jones will throw a lot of warnings just trying to start it if you did have hardware ray tracing, just because of that 6 gigabytes of VRAM. And if you could get past them by getting into game first, lowering all the settings, just squeezing past that kind of error, the games would run really badly. So we're going to try some new-ish games today, things that were released after the card were, probably not so long after that, although we'll try something reasonably new and we'll see what kind of performance it gets. The first game that we're going to try is Cyberpunk 2077. It is still an extremely popular game today. Lots of people still want to play it. It was released of a bit of a sham, to be honest. It run really badly, but they've put loads of fixes into it, and nowadays it's actually a great game for most hardware. So hopefully this graphics card will play it perfectly fine. We are going to be limiting all of the testing today to 1080p. The GTX 1660 Super, particularly when it comes to modern games, is a 1080p graphics card. There's no doubt about it. You can get away with playing some older games in 1440p, and I'm sure a lot of people do, but for the most part it's a 1080p card. So let's see what kind of performance we get in 1080p and the highest fidelity settings that we can actually set. Now that the game is loaded, we can see that we're currently getting an average of around 57 frames per second with a 1% low of 54. That is more than playable, and the game looks okay too. I'm not 100% sure what the settings are, but we'll run around for a little minute and let that settle. It's kind of fluctuating a little bit between 56, 57 frames per second on average with a 1% low of 51. It's just increased slightly and it's decreased again, back down again. But so far, everything is running smooth. If we just head over to the settings, we'll see what we've got configured. I do believe this is actually configured to a high preset, although it says custom because we turn off resolution scaling. I want to boost things a little bit. Now, typically what I would normally do is lower the quality preset, but today I'm going to try a little bit of FSR, see if that can make a difference. So we'll go to FSR 3. With quality setting. Of course, we don't have access to DLSS with this graphics card. You need an RTX one. So let's apply those settings and get back into game, see the difference. Now, one thing that I do notice is that performance has increased by quite a bit, actually. We're now boosting over 60 FPS. We're currently getting an average of 74 frames per second with a 1% low of 61. That means that the game is more than playable and very, very smooth, but graphically, FSR does affect things a little bit, and you can kind of tell there's a little bit of jaggedness around things, a little bit of blur, so it's probably not the best setting to pick, particularly if you want to get the best visual experience out of it. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to head back into the settings. We're going to turn off the resolution scaling, and we're going to drop the preset all the way down to a medium. Now, a medium is typically what I would do with graphics cards like this. I would actually lower the quality preset before I start playing with those tools. If the game is actually getting a reasonably high FPS, so let's say you were trying to aim for 120 frames per second, but you're only getting 80, then I would say go for your upscaler. But for now, because we were just out of reach of that 60 FPS, it was nearly there, but it wasn't quite. I'm going to lower the preset. Hopefully the game will look a little bit smoother, a little bit more okay, because medium settings are fine for most games, and hopefully the performance returns as well. So now that we're in a medium setting, our little jaggies and our blurry bits have gone completely. Everything looks great, and we are still now getting over 60 frames per second. We've currently got an average of 65 frames per second with a 1% low of 54. I would have liked that 1% low to be raised a little bit, but the game is more than smooth enough to play. Everything is running great. So there you go. If you do have a GTX 1660 Super with only 6 gigabytes of VRAM, you can play Cyberpunk 2077 in 1080p perfectly fine. Just drop that setting or the quality setting down to a medium, and everything is going to look great still, and the game is going to be very smooth as well. Now, for those of you paying attention to the metrics in the corner there, you will see that we didn't actually go anywhere near the 6 gigabytes of VRAM. In a high setting, we were getting close. It was about 5.5 gigabytes of VRAM, but once we dropped those settings down to a medium, particularly because the texture resolution would have come down a little bit, we were then using around just over 4 gigabytes. So the 6 gigabyte was actually really useful here, because even in a medium, if we only had a 4 gigabyte card, we'd have been hitting that limit and things would have been affected even more. So Cyberpunk 2077, medium settings, 1080p is perfectly fine. There's no point really going into any older games here, like Doom Eternal. Doom Eternal will work perfectly fine. Spider-Man Remastered will probably work perfectly fine. So I want to try something that is really new and something that actually runs pretty well on most hardware, and that game is Atomfall. Atomfall, when it originally released, I saw the videos of it and I thought, it was actually going to be a lot more demanding than it really was. I think they've done a fantastic job of the optimizations in this game, but before we actually start, we will hit the settings. It's going to revert to our default settings, check the graphics options. We'll go over to the options here. We can do it before we actually get into game. We are currently running in 1080p. We are using the GTX 1660 Super. We'll pop over to the graphics setting. It has set everything into high, and we've disabled motion blur and ambient occlusion. That is generally what I play this game at, although some of people out there have actually told me to start turning on the ambient occlusion. So for today, we're going to turn that back on again. Hopefully it will smoothen down some shadows or something. So we'll give that a go and see what happens. We'll start the game. Like I say, this game is generally very well optimized, so it runs beautifully on most things. We've pretty much played this game and got a 60 FPS experience on something like an R9 290X. That's a lot older than this graphics card, and it's a lot less powerful. So hopefully we're going to get some really good results out of this one. Maybe it's a game that you could actually increase to 1440p. Probably depends what kind of performance you like to play at. If it's 60 FPS, maybe a quid's in there. But for now, let's just resume the game and get into it. In the menus, we are stuck at around 60 FPS, but that of course is limited, so it's got to wait for it to get into game before we see anything. Now, for some reason, the results are kind of limited there to 60 FPS, so we're going to head back over to the options here. It kind of appears that we've got something like VSync on or something. So yes, we've got VSync on. Let's turn that off, get back into the game, and it should boost everything back up again. So this is actually looking pretty good. The game looks very nice in the high details. I can't really tell if ambient occlusion is really doing anything. It looks very similar to me, but we are getting an average of 91 frames per second with a 1% low of 73. More than playable, again in 1080p. This graphics card is really showing that it's still more than capable, particularly for AAA single player games. We're now getting an average of 89. It decreases a little bit, but we need to find a bit of a tone to get into, because the tones are really where things drop. The continuous does drop a little bit now and again to around 68 frames per second, 70 frames per second, but averagely everything is still working out. We've now dropped below 60 FPS on our 1% lows. We're currently running at 59 frames per second on the 1% lows, but still the game is really, really smooth. Everything does look great in this game. I don't think you could not play it. Graphics card is running at around 100%. We're nearly using that 6 GB of VRAM here. It's around 5.8 GB, but it's still coping quite well. There's no major stuttering, and our frame time graph is looking really good at around 11 to 12 milliseconds. Overall, I think this is actually a good experience on the GTX 1660 Super. It does meet the minimum requirements of this game, of course, and you can see that it is playing it perfectly fine. And we're getting some pretty decent results, well over 60 FPS, and so you're going to get a pretty decent FPS experience out of this. Unfortunately, I don't think that we can increase the resolution here to 1440p. It's just going to decimate things too much, so 1080p is the resolution that you want to go for. I'm now being attacked by people, so I'm gonna have to run away. Overall, great experience. Even the 0.1% lows are sitting at around 55 frames per second. That normally is where you get big issues with open world games like this, but no, everything is coping really well. And maybe the CPU is helping along here, but as long as you've got something strong enough to keep up the graphics card, you should be good to go. So there we go. The NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1660 Super in 2025 is probably one of the cheapest, for me in particular, price to performance graphics cards, because I got it for free. So every frame that you saw today didn't cost us a penny. We managed to get it. It just reminds us that if we do act as a community, a proper PC gaming community, and help each other out here and there, you probably could get yourself a nice little upgrade, just like I did, and it will cost you nothing at all. So be a friendly gamer. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you like this kind of content, and also let me know in the comments below if you are using a GTX 1660 Super, or even if it's a GTX 1660, what kind of experience are you getting and what kind of games are you playing? Where have you found the limitations in that graphics card? Because if you let me know that, I'll do some more testing and I'll see if I can replicate some of those things out there. And I'm sure, as always, I'll catch you guys in the next one.